It's recording now. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our today's session on VirtualMuleys. It's an online meetup group. We have done a lot of sessions in the past, but those who are joining us for the first time, welcome and thank you for joining us here. What you see on the screen are me and my three co-hosts that help us to run this group. Me and Sandeep here run the Amir side of it. Royston takes care of the APAC, and Angel takes care of EMEA. Since we are like online, like I was saying, everybody can join from everywhere, no barriers, right? So thank you. Alex, can you go on the next slide, please? So today's agenda is gonna be very simple for my part of it. There's more complications on Alex's side once he starts hitting the road, but we'll quickly go over some guidelines and housekeeping stuff, and then we'll hop on to Alex's presentation, and towards the end, we'll go for the Q&A. So some housekeeping part here in general, like there is a chat always open on the right side of your screen. Please be nice, considerate, and friendly in the chat. Feel free to talk about the stuff that we are looking at. Any feedback around it is always welcome, especially question answers. The chat can easily become very chatty, so not to lose your question answer, there will be a question Q&A tab on the right side of that general chat. We recommend you to use that tab to ask your questions. We will relay those questions to Alex at appropriate times or towards the end of the presentation, not to like disturb the flow unless it is part of that thing. We'll be flexible in that one, but please feel free to add your Q&As there. The recording of this event will be available on the event page, or you can go back to our Virtual Muleys YouTube channel. You will see all the recordings there. So if you miss anything, you'll be able to catch up. The most important part, the feedback that you provide us after the event through the form is always helpful. It helps us to drive more content to you. It helps us to plan and understand what community is looking for and go find the speakers and bring them to you. So definitely take a few moments for filling in the survey that you may receive at the end of this event, right? Next, please, Alex. Upcoming community meetups, like we have more than 120 meetups are all around the world, right? So if you are not part of your local groups or any online groups, we definitely suggest you go on meetups.mulesoft.com and take a look at what we have there. The groups near around you or the upcoming events that may be of interest to you, that's like a best place to go and find more meetup events like what we are having now. So I definitely recommend that. Upcoming event that is going to happen in next 1 month, two world tours on the US side, the one in the Washington DC and world tour NYC. I'm going to be in the NYC, so if anybody's going to be there, please feel free to stop by and say hi. But if you are around these places, we suggest you can go in and check there. That's the link, salesforce.com/events. You should be able to see the links, the registration details there. The next, please. So with this, I think the most important folks of today's event, Alex and Valerie. I think Valerie will join us. Sandeep, do you know if she's in here and have we given access to her?
I'll check on that, Manik.
Okay, thank you.
You can carry on.
So yeah, in meantime, let's go with Alex. Alex, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Manik and Sandeep, for having me. I'm Alex. I'm a senior product marketing manager here at MuleSoft. I've been here for just about 2 years now, and I help market and manage the platform products, which includes CloudHub 2.0. And see,
Okay,
Valerie has
thank you.
joined as well. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, we'll let her take a second to settle in. In meantime, then Sandeep, do you want to introduce yourself? Because after this, I think we're gonna hit on to the presentation there.
Yeah, sure. Hey everyone, I'm Sandeep Deshmukh. I'm a senior success architect in MuleSoft. Been working with MuleSoft for the last 4 years and also been part of the community over 5 years. Happy to be here, and I'm glad Valerie and Alex present here today. Valerie, it looks like you are able to turn on your audio video. So do you want to go next?
Yeah, I'm all good now. Thanks. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah,
Hi, everyone. My name is Valerie Lee, Director of Product Management from MuleSoft and specializing in platform that includes our greatest and latest CloudHub 2.0. So really excited to spend some time with all of you here today.
awesome. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Valerie. Thanks, Sandeep. So I think without taking more time on this thing, we will let Alex and Valerie take it forward with CloudHub 2.0. All yours, guys.
Awesome. Great. Well, hi, everyone. Thanks for joining today's meetup on CloudHub 2.0. I'm excited to have you all here today and have a conversation about how you can operationalize on CloudHub 2.0. We have a ton of material to cover today, so let's just jump right in. Going over today's agenda, you may have already seen it from the RSVP page, but we'll be going over a few things. First of which is we'll do a quick overview of the benefits and comparisons of CloudHub 2.0. Next, we'll be talking about some of the comparisons of CloudHub 1 to CloudHub 2 and some things you should consider when you're migrating. The third is where the bulk of the time is going to be, where we're going to talk about common use cases, such as securing your APIs, monitoring on CloudHub 2.0, as well as deploying and configuring CI/CD scripts on CloudHub 2.0. And we'll show you all of those ways that you can do that there. We'll then follow it up with CloudHub 2.0, as well as how it works with AWS products and the ecosystem there. And then we'll also have Valerie to talk about what's coming next for CloudHub 2.0. We'll make sure we leave enough time for us to cover questions. But as Manik said earlier, please write all your questions in the Q&A and we'll answer them as we get them. Cool. So let's jump right in. All right. So CloudHub 2.0 overview and features. Now, as you already know, we have two flavors in terms of our deployment options. One is our fully managed iPaaS, and the second is our runtime fabric option. And so with the fully managed iPaaS, this is where CloudHub and CloudHub 2.0 come in. I'm not going to go into too much detail on the value props. You've probably already seen slides like that before, but the key difference that I wanted to highlight here is that CloudHub 1.0 is built on top of VM-based architecture, and with CloudHub 2.0, it is now built on Kubernetes and container-based architecture. So that's a key difference here that will sort of provide added detail to the rest of today's session. If you're interested in learning more about Runtime Fabric, I'm sure that you've already attended, or Manik and Sandeep already have more content on the VirtualMuleys YouTube page, so check that out as well. Cool. So let's talk about the high-level architecture real quick. As you can see here, with CloudHub 2.0, there is now a separation or decoupling between the runtime and the control plane. On the bottom, you'll see the runtime plane, and this is where you'll find all of your apps and the Mule runtime. They will be packaged in what we'll later be talking about, which is replicas, and these will communicate via Ingress and to an MTLS to the Anypoint Control Plane. Anypoint Control Plane, those who have used MuleSoft before know that this is our centralized place where you can manage, secure, and monitor your APIs. And this is really the heart of a lot of that opportunity there. Cool. So then before we jump any further, I just want to make sure we re-highlight and retread on some terminology changes, just so we can reorient everyone into some of the differences and no one gets confused on the nomenclature changes. So in CloudHub 2.0, VPCs are now called private spaces. And also with CloudHub 2.0, workers are now called replicas. And then in CloudHub 2.0, the DLB is no longer, and the Ingress controller is now our out-of-the-box solution that helps with load balancing as well as moving traffic, distributing traffic and workload across your different replicas and apps. So just some things there for terminology changes. Cool. So let's talk about quickly the overview of CloudHub 2.0 features. As you may have seen in the use cases, we'll be talking about security and monitoring separately, but I want to highlight the other things that are new with CloudHub 2.0. The first of which is replicas. So speaking a little bit more about replicas and how they differ, these are the dedicated instances of Mule Runtime that help run your integration applications, sort of like the workers that you might have remembered. With CloudHub 2.0, the capacity is also determined by vCore, but there is greater granularity in how you divvy up your resources to a minimum of 0.1 vCore. The other part is because of the Kubernetes-based architecture that they're built on top of, now there's greater isolation, and each app will have their own replica that the app is deployed in. The next is manageability. So because of the Kubernetes-based architecture, it means that replicas are deployed and monitored independently within a given space. And the last is locality. So within any given space that your app is deployed, or that your replica is deployed into, they will share the same specific region and sub-region of the space as well. Going into shared global regions, this is how you can deploy across different regions across the world. So like Americas, EU, APAC, etc. There are more detailed slides later, which I'll just skim through very quickly, but I just wanted to provide an example on some changes as a result of the shared global regions. So for apps that are deployed in a shared space, you'll see this example domain. Some new changes that I have highlighted and underlined are the unique ID. So first, the unique ID is a new 6-digit app ID that's appended to your app name to make it so there's greater uniqueness in your apps. And also, it removes the uniqueness requirement on your app name, so it allows for more flexibility there. The second is the shard. So the shard represents a 6-digit space identifier, which highlights which space or identifies to which space the app is deployed into. The last is region, and this is as it states, the deployment region of your shared space or where the app is deployed to. So those are the shared global regions. Next, I want to jump into multi-tenancy. This is how we support, and this is supported through the control and runtime plane. On the runtime plane, this is separated by shared global spaces and private spaces. With shared global spaces, you have multi-tenancy, and with private spaces, it's single tenancy. On the runtime plane, this supports multi-tenancy because there's a management console and platform services that have a shared everything architecture, which means that it's the same web UI to secure, monitor your apps and replicas across all of CloudHub 2.0. The last thing I wanted to cover is availability and scalability. As you can see here, there are some existing features that we have adopted from CloudHub 1, and we have added new features to CloudHub 2.0 that help with this availability and scalability feature. Intelligent healing, rolling updates are things you've already known about, but with CloudHub 2.0, we also have this new feature, which is called redundant platform, which means that even if you only assign one worker or replica to an app, it will, even at the time of failure, there will be another copy there to pick up the slack so that your end user experiences as little downtime as possible or zero downtime. The other new feature is clustering. What clustering is basically for any one given app, you can deploy multiple replicas. These replicas help share and balance the workload across them, and it adds for greater reliability and resiliency there. Something to just note is that because they are clustered together, they also will have to share some memory. So there's some allocation there that you have to consider as well. All right, like I mentioned, if you're interested in learning more, we have individual slides for each of these features that you can take a look at, but we're not going to cover too much more in detail today because we want to get to all the other good stuff that we have. Awesome. So I wanted to highlight some migration considerations when you're going from CloudHub 1 to 2.0. These by no means are fully comprehensive, but these are some of the things that we've heard about through customers, through previous meetups that I've listened in on, and certain things that may be relevant to you to consider as you're moving towards CloudHub 2.0. So the first one is that Mule runtime. So Mule runtime, you must upgrade it to at least 4.3.0, and and these are the ones that are supported for CloudHub 2.0. The second is with CloudHub 2.0, applications will now have bursting configured by default. While this will not be as predictable as CloudHub 1, where you could have optimized it via AWS credits, this has its own benefits. And if you still want to get more predictability, there are other methods that you can also find in documentation as well. The third is in that VPN and AWS Transit Gateway are supported in CloudHub 2.0. Things like VPC peering and Direct Connect will be supported through Transit Gateway moving forward. And so that's something also to consider if you're using those products today. The next is when you're enabling, disabling, or modifying the schedule for any application, it will require an application restart. So add that into your workflow moving forward. And last on this slide is the security tokenizer, as well as WAF policies are not supported in CloudHub 2.0. Some other considerations that are important to highlight is the secured property feature. So this is a new feature in CloudHub 2.0, and what it means is that now protected values are no longer needed to be passed through the Mule artifact JSON. The other new feature that we have in CloudHub 2.0 is VPN highability. So this allows for reduced downtime when you're doing VPN maintenance, and this is a built-in feature in CloudHub 2.0. Something to note is that for each VPN redundancy, the limiting factor here is your own resource allotments. So just keep that in mind if you want to use this feature. Another change from CloudHub 1 to 2.0 is that monitoring vCore usage is now done in access management at the business group level. This was something that was previously available in Runtime Manager, so just keep that in mind. And then the last thing I wanted to share in terms of considerations is that the CloudHub connector and as well as customer alert notifications are deprecated in CloudHub 2.0. Again, like I mentioned, these are not fully comprehensive, so we look forward to answering some of your questions that you may have, but hopefully we'll also consider them and answer them in our use cases section that we're going to get to in just a second. Cool. So let's talk about how CloudHub 2 solves for common use cases. In this section, we'll be talking about how to secure APIs, monitoring your APIs and apps, and then the third is deploying your apps via different methods, as well as in migrating and integrating with your CI/CD pipelines. So first, let's talk about securing your APIs with CloudHub 2.0. Before I jump any further, I just wanted to highlight and provide a high-level architecture of CloudHub 2.0, and specifically this one shows the private space and how everything flows in and out of a private space. As you can see here, the dotted line represents endpoint platform. You see API Manager and Runtime Manager outside of the runtime here. These are the things that are in the control plane, but are also some of the tools to help you secure your APIs, and replicas there. Within CloudHub 2.0, you have private space, which we'll get into more detail in a second, but this is where your replicas can be deployed. Consumers that are trying to access will basically access these apps in the replica via network load balancers and Ingress controllers. The network load balancer helping to distribute workload, and all traffic goes in and out of a NAT gateway. With communication, like I mentioned, you have your VPN and AWS Transit Gateway to help you communicate with your other data centers, whether it's on-premise or in the cloud. And this is just a high-level architecture of how the CloudHub 2.0 functions and communicates with your broader ecosystem. I wanted to also give a special thanks to Diane Kessler, if she's in the chat today, because I learned a lot of this from her CloudHub 2.0 class. So if you have the opportunity to take that, I would definitely recommend it because it's super comprehensive and helpful. So thank you to Diane. Cool. Okay, so let's talk about securing APIs in CloudHub 2.0 now. So I've highlighted three main ways in which you can secure APIs, and they are broken down into three sections. The first of which is the private space. In this section, we'll be talking about inbound and outbound firewall rules, static IP addresses, as well as TLS contexts. Next, we're going to jump into the Ingress. So via the Ingress controls, we'll be able to secure APIs via public and private endpoints, SSL forwarding, as well as last mile security. I'll get into more of that in a second. The last is, via CloudHub 2.0 natively. And so this is done via the API Manager as well as the Runtime Manager. So we're going to go through each one of these sections in detail and show you how that all works. Great. 1 second. All right. So let's show how we secure APIs on CloudHub 2.0 via the private space. The first thing I want to highlight is the in and outbound firewall traffic. So in CloudHub 2.0, helps solve a really necessary problem that we face in CloudHub 1. Previously, with CloudHub 1, there was no way to control firewall rules for outbound traffic. So for example, if someone said, I only want to control SFTP traffic, there wasn't an easy way to do that. However, with CloudHub 2.0, users can take advantage of our intuitive web UI to help easily manage inbound and outbound traffic rules for a private space through the Firewall Rules tab. If you went to the Management Console, then you click Runtime Manager and then click Private Space, you'll notice there's a tab that's labeled Firewall Rules for your given private space. In this, you'll see an intuitive trash can where you can remove various line items so that you can prevent inbound and outbound traffic to your private space. You can also add it via the rules. So it's really intuitive and it's an added feature that wasn't previously existing in CloudHub 1. The next is with static IPs. So how do you secure it with static IPs and what are the benefits? Well, first, I want to talk a little bit more about static IPs. In case you're curious, the number of static IPs you are provided is determined by the number of availability zones in the region that your private space is deployed in. So keep that in mind if you're curious about why there are a certain number of static IPs shown. The key benefits of static IPs here are twofold. So the first is, I would say, largely functional and time-saving, which is that with static IPs, it allows for whitelisting at the private space level. In CloudHub 1.0, if you want to do IP whitelisting, it had to be done per application, which meant that more time was spent manually doing this, as well as maintaining these whitelists, and that led to a lot of maintenance over time. Now with CloudHub 2.0, that's not the case, and provides a much needed quality of life update. The second is, if you wanted to have those features in CloudHub 1, you could, but they were not free for VPCs, and it required additional implementation and work to make that happen there as well. So just nice to have that these static IPs are now natively or out of the box available with CloudHub 2.0. Great. So then let's talk about our last bit, which is TLS context. So TLS context, for those who don't know, help define domains that are available when you're deploying apps to the private space. And these can also be used to enable mutual TLS. These TLS contexts, once they're created, they can be used to also define inbound and outbound firewall traffic rules. And in case people are interested in learning about the capacity, each private space can have up to 10 custom TLS contexts, and one is included by default. So, like I mentioned before, if you access the private spaces tab within Runtime Manager, in the sub tab, you'll be able to see this one called Domains and TLS. Under this tab, you'll see some visual representation similar to what you have here. You have your default TLS context that's provided with each private space, and you have the ability to create TLS context just by clicking a single button. All you have to do is add your own cert as well as your private key, and you can get up and running and very, very quickly. Cool. So now that we know how to do that, and how many you can have, what are some example scenarios in which APIs can be secured via this method? So I've labeled 3. Again, not comprehensive, but these are some of the common ones that we identified when building out this presentation. The first of which is, say you have internal and external APIs. Well, with multiple TLS contexts, you can have different domains for them, and it allows for greater granularity in how you're securing your APIs. The second is, say you have different consumers of your APIs. This allows you to also package them for these different consumers in a way that adds, again, more granularity to your securing methods as well. Last but not least, with TLS context, it also allows for two-way SSL validations. And again, I know I'm sounding like a broken record, but this adds more granular control in how users can define and secure their privileged data across different types of their service accounts. So that is the third and final method that we have listed here today on how you can secure APIs via private spaces. Next, let's jump into securing APIs via the Ingress controller. So the first thing I want to highlight here is public and private endpoints. So depending on whether or not you're deploying your apps onto a shared or private space, you will have access to secure app via the endpoints exposed. So starting out with the public shared spaces, each app will need to have at least one public endpoint available, but it can also have up to 3 endpoints. So that's how you can secure APIs via that are deployed into the shared space. Next is for apps that are deployed in the private space, you have a little bit more options. So with private spaces, all apps that are deployed there, you can actually delete all of their public endpoints, which means that you can stop all public access to any API or app that you deploy there. For those, that what that means though is that there's still going to be a private endpoint that's created by default that allows you to still communicate with your app, even if it doesn't have any public endpoints available. So this is an added level of security that is available in CloudHub 2.0. Next, I want to talk about forwarding SSL sessions and last mile security. Now, I could not do this fully in justice in a single slide. So if you're interested, I've also listed out the documentation here on how you can learn more, but I'm going to go into it in brief detail here just for an overview or a taste of what these do. So the first is forward SSL session. So these are primarily used for client auth, but it allows, it forwards the client certificate via HTTP request headers so that they're available for the application to use and review. These fields can be then used to identify or authenticate a client and allow application to determine and use the identity that's provided in the header. So allows for added security there. The next is the last mile security. So with last mile security, it forwards the HTTPS connections that will then be later decrypted by the application itself. In order to activate this or in order to enable this, it will require an SSL certificate to be included within the Mule application itself. So when you're doing this, or if you're interested in doing this, keep in mind that it'll also take up more CPU resources as well. For more documentation, please look at the link that I provided. And again, all of these slides will also be available for you. So after this session, so you can also use these as well. Great. So now let's talk, last but not least, on some of the native capabilities that are available to CloudHub 2.0 that are buoyed by our control plane. So this is where Anypoint API Manager comes in. The existing things that you've been using and that were available to CloudHub 1 are also available to CloudHub 2.0. The way you secure APIs and microservices, as well as the policies that you created, these all still are available and apply to CloudHub 2.0. And so the things that you're used to and have used in the past can also be, and it can also be easily applicable to apps that are deployed onto CloudHub 2.0. So really want to highlight that, mainly because this is another existing service that showcases not just our flexibility or our capabilities, but also the power of the Anypoint platform as a whole. So I'm not going to go into too much detail for that because for those that are here, you probably know the functionalities of API Manager, but I just wanted to highlight that as a feature as well. Great. Okay, so now that we've finished all the ways in which we can support and secure APIs with CloudHub 2.0, let's talk about some of the monitoring features that you can find in CloudHub 2.0 as well. All right, so quick overview. How do you configure monitoring in CloudHub 2.0? Well, for starters, CloudHub 2.0 monitors all applications and by doing so, will restart them if they fail and allowing for recovery without your intervention required. So this is a feature in CloudHub 2.0. The second is, if something were to fail or to succeed, this will alert via Runtime Manager. Understood that maybe some features are not ported over into CloudHub 2.0, but if you want to find other monitoring features, these can be configured with Anypoint monitoring. And for those that are joining us today that have Cloud or Titanium subscriptions, these advanced monitoring will continue to be supported there as well. The third is that with CloudHub 2.0, application and Ingress logs are collected by the platform. And via the Ingress, you can even create custom logs and configure them, as well as download them as well. So new features there that we're going to highlight in later slides. And then for those who need log forwarding, now we support custom log4j.xml files in CloudHub 2.0. So this will help enable stream logs to external log collectors like Splunk. All right. So these next couple of slides are mostly just visual. I'll talk a little bit about them, but just want to showcase, where and how you can find these features and what they look like if you haven't seen them before. So in the Advanced tab, in the advanced tab, you'll be able to see these Ingress load balancer logs. And so in here on the left, you see the very visible UI that you can just download the logs outright. In addition, on the bottom right, you'll be able to see all the custom log levels. You'll be able to add specific IP addresses that you want to audit or you want to see more and highlight more about. And on top of that, once you add an IP address, you can also choose the log level for that specific IP address. So that's something cool to consider there. At the runtime manager level, you can then, this is where your application logs are stored. And, with this is where you'll be able to also find the log forwarding functions as well. So this is something that I think is new to CloudHub 2, but 2.0, but previously, in order to enable log forwarding to Splunk, you needed to disable application logs. I believe this is no longer required, and you can use log4j as well as application logs to have both of them simultaneously in CloudHub 2.0. So something new to note there. Again, wherever I felt necessary, I listed documentation so that if you're interested, you can learn more about it from people that describe it in greater detail than we have time to do so today. Great. So last on the common use cases section, I wanted to showcase how we can configure and migrate CI/CD scripts on into CloudHub 2.0. In order to do that, we're going to start with the Maven deployment method. So before I showcase the architecture or what it looks like, as well as some helpful slides that provide code and documentation, I want to showcase or highlight some of the changes and the new requirements that you need to do in order to deploy apps onto CloudHub 2 via this method. So the first thing is that apps must be deployed onto Anypoint Exchange before you deploy it onto a shared or private space. This is required in part because of the general architecture of RTF and Kubernetes-based Kubernetes. Because with RTF and Kubernetes-based architecture, all applications need to be pulled from repositories. So we need to make sure we do that before we deploy onto a shared or private space. Otherwise, we'll have an error. The next is make sure that you upgrade your Exchange Maven Facade API, because it will now need to support snapshot assets. This is the asset that is going to be deployed onto Anypoint Exchange. What an snapshot asset is an asset that is permanently in a dev state, and it cannot be promoted to another state. And in order to do that, you will need to add in a new property in your pom.xml file labeled distribution management. And that is how you'll be able to upload your jar file onto Exchange v3. The other two things that you need to upgrade is your Mule Maven plugin must be upgraded to at least 3.7x or higher. And then your Mule runtime, as I mentioned, all the way in the beginning, you need to upgrade that to at least 4.3 or higher. Great. So just a visual representation of how this all works. You'll see that you first do a clean deploy that pushes the Mule application to Exchange. From there, you can then deploy it to Runtime Manager, where then it will also pull the app from Exchange so that it can be properly deployed onto your shared or private space. The slide was in courtesy of Implementum.com, and I think it really helped display in a very concise manner. Cool. So then some other things that I wanted to highlight. I'm not going to go into great detail on these, but I just wanted to provide coding examples in case you find yourselves needing this. There's the distribution management, the Maven plugin update example. Here, I've also broken down, some config examples here, showcasing, like where you can change your configurations between type, name, requirements, Ingress settings, etc. And I've also had a high-level tutorial here as well. This is from my personal notes when I was taking some of these courses, so maybe it'll be helpful to you as well. But again, if you're interested, please review the deck at a later time, and you'll be able to find all that there as well. The other method that you can use is via the CLI. And so the documentation will do a better job of describing it than I will, but I wanted to highlight one main difference between the Anypoint CLI commands from CloudHub 1 to CloudHub 2. So with CloudHub 1, as you can see, next to the application, you need to include CloudHub-application. With CloudHub 2, it is just application. So when you're writing your commands, if you're used to CloudHub 1, just keep that in mind and review the documentation to make sure that what you're doing is, is represented correctly, and so that you don't run into any hiccups along the way. The last is via the management center or console. This is, I would say, the most self-explanatory, but in case you haven't used or haven't trialed Anypoint Platform before, in the main home tab, you'll click the Runtime Manager. You can deploy the application via Runtime Manager, and then via the web UI, you'll be able to see the place to write your application name, your deployment target to a shared or private space, application file in which you can upload or pull from Exchange, and then also the runtime version that you use, the replica size, the count of replicas, et cetera, et cetera. So just something there for you to keep in mind as well. Now, next section I want to talk about is CloudHub 2.0 and how we interact with our partners at AWS. There are two ways, and I want to first start out by talking about the AWS Transit Gateway. So as I mentioned before, with CloudHub 2.0, we now support the Transit Gateway, which consolidates VPC peering as well as Direct Connect features. And so what AWS Transit Gateway is that you can think of it as just a cloud router. So it allows you to access and communicate between your private spaces, on-prem data centers, AWS VPCs, and et cetera. With CloudHub 2.0, you can attach a private space to a Transit Gateway via your AWS account. The only stipulation here is that your Transit Gateway and the private space must be deployed onto the same region. So keep that in mind when you're configuring your Transit Gateway. The second way in which we can integrate with the AWS products and ecosystem is via service roles. So in CloudHub 2.0, you can enable AWS service roles within a private space to allow and access AWS resources that are in another AWS account. So you can see the picture below in the Advanced tab. You can select and check the Enable AWS service roles to make this feature live. By assigning your CloudHub service as a trust principal and imbuing it with the proper policies in AWS, the apps that are deployed here onto the private space will then be able to access any allowed resources that are available in that AWS account. It allows for an easier integration out of the box so that you can more easily coexist with the rest of your tech stack. So that's something that's cool with CloudHub 2.0. Awesome. I know I've just thrown a lot of information at you, but for the sake of time, this is all we can have today. Obviously, if there's more information that you want, please feel free to check the slides, documentation links, etc. For more information that we couldn't cover today. But now I'm going to pass it over to Valerie to tell us what's coming up next. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex. That was such a condensed but informative session. Hopefully, all of you were able to absorb the information. I want to spend a few minutes to sort of talk about both the deliverables that we've made in the past couple of months, as well as give you a preview of what's coming next. Can you go to the next slide? All right, I guess does the video play there?
I apologize. I'm on my personal desktop, so unfortunately I can't access video. Sorry about that.
All right, it's okay. I can just tell you what goes into it. So I just want to emphasize that there has never been a better time to start testing, validating, and using CloudHub 2.0. We've spent the past 2 quarters, right, since the GA of CloudHub 2.0 in the second half of last year, to really consolidate all of the observations, issues, and feedback from early users. And we've been rapidly delivering features enhancements since then to ensure we address all the feedback as soon as possible, and also showcase that this platform is the latest and greatest, where we can build feature on top of other features and being able to continuously deliver value to all of our customers. So some of the examples that we deliver in the past 3 months are being able to deploy proxy with TLS context from APM Manager, which for those of you that are familiar with our products, right, that has been a key ask for both RTF customers as well as CloudHub 2.0 customer who use the same containerized architecture under the hood. The other really important aspect to highlight for CloudHub 2.0 is the much more robust egress control. Some of the ones out of the box that Alex already highlighted are being able to set both inbound and outbound firewall rules at the private space level. And for those of you that are familiar with CloudHub 1, that has been a very highly requested feature, and that hasn't been possible, right, with the existing limitation of CloudHub 1 tech stack. And we've improved upon that in CloudHub 2.0, and there is also a lot more features coming out in that regard. Some of the ones that we followed up quickly after GA are further increase both inbound and outbound firewall rule limit, as well as remove the default route. So that means customer can completely control all the traffic coming from CloudHub 2 to their private network going through TGW, Transit Gateway, so that there is no need, right, to add any default internet route at this point. So you can think of essentially CloudHub 2.0 as an extension of your own private network. Some other features to highlight here are HTTP header size increase to support relevant use cases. And we also added ability to download Ingress log via API. Aside from these enhancements and features, right, like some other really optimization we're doing behind the scene are around operations. For example, we have standardized a lot of the CloudHub 2 continuous infrastructure updates to the same maintenance, monthly maintenance window as we use for CloudHub 1 today. So all the infrastructure patching, even though it's behind the scene, will take place in a much more predictable cadence going forward. And some other use case that we've heard, right? Very, very interesting observation from customers at this point are, for example, I know there are a lot of questions around bursting, right? Like we will address them more in the FAQ questions, but we've also seen customers who are much more CPU bound, getting better performance out of CloudHub 2.0. And we really welcome feedback as such, right? Because we have much more flexibility to fine tune the container sizing, the limits, and then the reserve, right, for both memory and CPU behind the scene in CloudHub 2.0. So any important use case that you are encountering, such as the ones that I just mentioned, right, very large traffic that are CPU bound, definitely give it a try in CloudHub 2.0. You will see a much better performance improvement when you jump, for example, from 0.2 vCore to 1 vCore. Whereas in CloudHub 1, you'll most likely only see a memory increase and not that much of a CPU improvement. So this slide, I already see a lot of interest in the Q&A around what's coming up next. So I'll also spend some time for the next couple of months what we have already planned to deliver. A key use case for our healthcare industry is to support non-HTTP protocols such as HL7, MMP, right? So that's something that we're going to support natively in CloudHub 2. And it will be done, right, like via much better user experience versus a little bit more hacky way that customers are doing in the CloudHub 1 workers, right, or the EC2 instances that they're doing today. We're going to continuously enhance egress control. And a really important use case that we will support going forward is to support domain-based egress control. So think about allowing all of your applications or a subset of your applications to Salesforce.com, for example. And that you will only have to establish that rule based on domain, right, and assign that to applications versus have to whitelist a ton of different IPs, right? And that's very hard for SaaS service and applications. Another important one that I saw some of you asking is what tooling, right? What migration tooling will be provided for customers that have a meaningful, significant amount of workloads currently already running in CloudHub 1. From our early engagements with customers, right, and discussions, we learned that one of the key challenge is to convince your IT team, right, or network admins to assign a separate set of CIDR blocks just for you to use CloudHub 2 private space. So we have planned a in-place upgrade for your existing VPCs in the future where you can utilize or reuse the existing settings as well as CIDR blocks, firewall rules that you have in place in CloudHub 1.0, and essentially allowing you to use that towards a private space upgrade. Last but not least, I want to touch on the auto-scaling feature. Some of you have already made a very astute comment that, hey, since auto-scaling is a very native feature to Kubernetes, that should be done and offered in CloudHub 2.0. You are correct. This is going to be done in a much better and efficient way, sort of fulfilling the promise, right, of Kubernetes as a self-healing and a very declarative platform. So we are trying to design a user experience around it. So those configurations are not completely exposed to users at the moment, but that's definitely on the roadmap for this year. And we're trying to understand all of the triggers, right? All of the settings that customers want to use around auto scaling so that the experience we deliver will still be like a SaaS experience, right? You don't have to understand all of the fields and inputs that Kubernetes is asking, but more around what do you want to accomplish for your application? What are the SLAs you want to meet for your applications? And then we'll translate those into relevant Kubernetes templates behind the scenes. So hopefully that will give you a quick look into some of the most important features that we have upcoming. And yeah, please continue to engage with us and let us know if there are others that you see missing. And we're always happy to hear from you and keep the roadmap, right, flexible and open to meet your needs.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Valerie. And for those who want to see the video but cannot today, I'm going to make sure that we have it available once the deck is shared out. And so now, Manik, Sandeep, would you like to help moderate the Q&A section so that we can help answer questions?
Yeah, sure. I can go first, Manik, and then you can ask the next question. So I think, Valerie, just a follow-up question for you based on the roadmap. Are there any plans to sunset CloudHub 1.0?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. We don't have hard enforcement or restriction at the moment, mostly because CloudHub 1 is still a fully supported product, right? Like we want customer to feel comfortable using it, running their critical business workloads on it. But definitely, as we see more critical applications and customers moving their applications right into CloudHub 2.0, the goal, right, the ultimate goal for us is to maintain one platform. So we will work on the timeline and announce as it becomes more concrete. But for now, definitely the goal is to make sure that we address all of your concerns and needs to ensure a successful migration to CloudHub 2.0, as well as welcoming any new projects that you have thinking about, and then just deploy them directly into CloudHub 2.0. So you reduce, right, and minimize any future needs to potentially have to upgrade or migrate between the two platforms.
Yeah,
Thank you, Valerie.
That's good. So probably next question to Alex when you are going through the features. So the clustering part of it, in case of application redeployment or restart happens in CloudHub 2.0, how is that state preserved do we still need to like do something special with object store v2 or persistent layer anything, or that is all handled by the cluster feature?
I can maybe highlight that really quickly. I already posted the answer. Sorry, Alex. I just want to make sure that I set the I clarify a confusion that is I'm seeing happening, right? Like, so clustering in CloudHub 2.0 very specifically meaning that using the hazelnut technology, right, where we allow replicas to share memory directly. And so this is slightly different from the more infrastructure stateless clustering concept that we see in Kubernetes, right? So what this gives you is that, yes, there is going to be shared memory between your replicas in the same deployment. However, this is not persisted, right, outside of the cluster. So if your whole cluster goes down, right, then there is no persistence beyond that. So you will still have to use MQ, right, for that purpose. And persistent queue is not supported. So the best, the alternative, hopefully is better, right, is to use MQ.
Yeah, that makes sense. Everything is the external state management is outside of that cluster in there. Okay,
Yeah.
I see a couple of questions around the bursting feature of credits. Like the credits, they do accrue, right? So how do really credits work with CloudHub 2.0? 1.0, we know when we knew that, but what is the behavior of those credits in 2.0?
Yeah, so for bursting, for the smaller instances that we're talking about here, such as 0.1, right, 0.2 vCores specifically, you will definitely see a much better sort of bursting credit lift in CloudHub 1 versus CloudHub 2.0, right? So I'm not going to sugarcoat and tell you that you will see no difference between the two. But really where CloudHub 2.0 shine is that it creates a much more a predictable, right, like environment for you to do sizing going forward versus sort of relying on bursting credit as part of your sort of operations, right? Going forward, you kind of have to restart your applications top of the hour or something like that to really use the accrued bursting credits. CloudHub 2.0, underneath behind the scene, right, we leverage CPU reserved as well as limits, which will allow us some bursting based on availability in the node, right? So it's going to be case by case. Smaller instances you probably won't see as much, but as I mentioned, right, as you move on to the bigger instances, such as going to the 1 vCore, you will see much better performance and stability in CloudHub 2.0 than CloudHub 1.0. So there's some trade-offs for sure. I encourage definitely understand, right, how that works in CloudHub 2.0 and see what meets your use case the best. Also taking into consideration in the future, there will be auto scaling, right? So you don't necessarily need to really size for your peak traffic or peak usage all the time.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I think we looked at the monitoring. Alex was walking over the monitoring part. One question that I have seen other places plus here, like any idea when functional monitoring will be supported in CloudHub 2.0? Like, do we have that on roadmap for the functional monitoring?
That's great feedback. I'm going to take that back to the team for sure. We don't have a concrete date to communicate at this point, but we will share as it definitely becomes more concrete. So definitely appreciate feedback as such.
Okay, thank you. While we are, Sandeep, do you have a question? So
Yeah,
just
Valerie, just to follow up on that, I think there is another roadmap related question around is CloudHub going to be available for Cloud customers? CloudHub 2.
No plans at this point. As you are aware of the whole Salesforce Hyperforce strategy, right? I think we're trying to stay more aligned on that versus sort of doing additional GovCloud related investment, right? So that's sort of the future of the entire MuleSoft's public sec deployment best practice, right? So we're trying to definitely be part of that strategy. That being said, right, definitely please talk through your account team if there is urgent needs that you need to address. We'll have that discussion with you to understand the urgency and then the use cases as well.
Great. Thanks, Valerie.
I'm probably sticking to the roadmap part of it. Another question on there is the secrets manager support. Is that anywhere, or like is there a plan for that?
Secrets manager in what sense?
CloudHub 2.0, I think Prasenjit, that's the only thing mentioned. Secrets manager in CloudHub 2.0 is, can we use secrets manager in CloudHub 2.0 now? Or I haven't tried, so I don't know.
It is available, right? So behind the scene, we do leverage Secrets Manager to store the TLS context, if that's what you're talking about, right? So that is already in place, but we don't have the separate workflow as some customer might have experienced today that go into Secrets Manager, set up the TLS context, and then sort of have the workflow that way. It's more of an embedded model, right? If you so eventually the place where you set it up is through the private space workflow.
And
We do
Valerie,
have,
to add to that, with the new TLS context, like through API managers, secret managers leverage that as well, right? The new capability that we added.
Yeah. Some other requests that we've seen and heard are, all of you are familiar with that, is the externalized application, right, certificate, and being able to decouple that from the application itself, right, so that you don't have to bundle it every single time. So we have got plenty of requests on that, and that's something we're exploring for the roadmap for sure.
Okay, that's it. I think we have 2 minutes left. Probably still time for one last question. One of the big limitations, I'm just reading off the question as it is. One of the big limitations at the minute in CH2 seems to be around the monitoring. As I understand, alerting in Runtime Manager is limited to deployment success and failure. Customers must use alerting functionality in monitoring instead of, which obviously has limits and or costs. Are there any plans to enhance this to feature match with CloudHub 1.0?
Yes, so definitely we're always interested in continuing to enhance and improve monitoring experience for our customer. In fact, we're actually looking into standardizing a lot of our monitoring capabilities to much more industry standard technology today, right? So we are making a lot of changes in the area, and definitely encourage you to stay tuned, right? And I don't know if it's going to be a similar meetup, but we'll definitely share the plans around that as they get more finalized.
Awesome. Thank you. I think we have just 1 minute. I do want to take that minute to appreciate you both. Thank you for sharing all this content, and definitely thank you all of our attendees taking their time and join us here. So we do want to respect everybody's time of 1 p.m. or whatever the end time they have and the other commitments. Thank you, everyone. We do hope you come back here to catch up on all the content. It will be on the meetup page probably tomorrow or day after tomorrow. The slides as well as the recording will be available on the events page. So feel free to visit us back and take a look at it. Sandeep, anything?
Yeah, thank you, everyone. And thank you, Valerie and Alex, for presenting and helping us with a lot of information. So thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.
Thank you.
Take
Bye.
care. Bye. Bye.